What happens when two of entertainment's most outspoken personalities clash on live television? The answer is a moment that nobody saw coming. A conversation that spiraled out of control and a walkout that left audiences stunned. Leslie Jones appeared on the Kelly Clarkson show expecting a lighthearted interview. But what unfolded was something entirely different. Before we get into what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us whose side you're on in this situation. The show started like any other episode. Kelly welcomed Leslie to the stage with her signature warmth. The audience applauded, and Leslie took her seat with that infectious energy she's known for. The first few minutes were smooth. They talked about Leslie's recent projects, her comedy tour, and some funny stories from her time on Saturday Night Live. The audience was laughing, Kelly was engaged, and everything seemed perfectly fine. But then the conversation took a turn. Kelly brought up a topic that had been circulating in the media, a comment Leslie had made during a podcast interview about the state of comedy today. Leslie had been vocal about how she felt certain comedians were being too careful, too worried about offending people, and how that was killing the art form. It was a statement that had sparked debates online, with some people agreeing and others calling her out for being insensitive. Kelly, known for wanting to dig deeper into conversations, decided to address it. She smiled and said, "So, I heard you talking about comedy and how you think people are being too sensitive these days. Can you explain what you meant by that?" The question itself wasn't aggressive, but the way Kelly phrased it had an edge to it, like she was setting up for a counterpoint. Leslie shifted in her seat, clearly noticing the change in tone. She responded with, "Yeah, I said that because it's true. Comedy is about pushing boundaries, about making people uncomfortable sometimes. If we're constantly worried about who we might offend, then what's the point? We're just going to end up with boring, safe comedy that doesn't say anything real." Kelly nodded slowly, but her expression showed she wasn't entirely on board with that perspective. She leaned forward slightly and said, "But don't you think there's a difference between pushing boundaries and just being hurtful? I mean, comedy can be edgy without punching down at people who are already marginalized, right?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension starting to build. Leslie's face tightened, and she let out a short laugh, the kind that signals frustration rather than amusement. She said, "Punching down? Kelly, comedy has always been about making fun of everything and everyone. The moment you start deciding who can and can't be joked about, you're putting limits on free expression. That's not what comedy is supposed to be." Kelly didn't back down. She responded with, "But Leslie, free expression doesn't mean freedom from consequences. If a joke hurts someone, especially someone from a community that's already struggling, doesn't the comedian have some responsibility to think about that?" Leslie's body language shifted completely. She sat up straighter, her tone became sharper, and she said, "So now we're policing jokes? That's what we're doing? Comedy is subjective, Kelly. What's funny to one person might not be funny to another. But that doesn't mean we should start canceling people over jokes. That's ridiculous." Kelly's smile faded a bit, and she replied, "I'm not talking about canceling anyone. I'm talking about accountability. There's a difference between making a joke that challenges people and making a joke that just reinforces harmful stereotypes. Don't you see that?" The back and forth was getting more heated with every exchange. Leslie was clearly frustrated, and Kelly wasn't letting go of her point. The audience was watching in silence, sensing that this wasn't going to end well. Leslie shot back, "Harmful stereotypes? Kelly, I'm a Black woman who's been in comedy for decades. I know what it's like to be the target of jokes. But I also know that comedy is one of the few places where we can actually talk about difficult things without everyone losing their minds. If we start censoring ourselves, we lose that." Kelly responded quickly, "But it's not about censoring yourself. It's about being thoughtful. You can still be funny and edgy without alienating people. That's all I'm saying." Leslie shook her head, clearly done with the direction of the conversation. She said, "No, what you're saying is that comedians need to walk on eggshells to make sure nobody gets offended, and that's just not realistic. People are going to be offended no matter what. That's life." Kelly's jaw tightened. She paused for a moment, then said, "So, you're saying we should just ignore people's feelings? That we shouldn't care if our words hurt someone?" Leslie's eyes widened, and her voice raised slightly. She said, "That's not what I'm saying at all, and you know it. Don't twist my words, Kelly. I'm saying that comedy is meant to challenge people, to make them think, to make them uncomfortable. If you can't handle that, then maybe comedy isn't for you." The room felt like it was holding its breath. Kelly looked directly at Leslie and said, "Maybe it's not about whether people can handle it. Maybe it's about whether the comedian can handle being told that their joke wasn't funny or that it crossed a line. Because it seems like you're the one who can't handle criticism right now." That last line from Kelly hit like a punch. The accusation that Leslie couldn't handle criticism flipped the entire dynamic of the conversation. Leslie's expression went from frustrated to genuinely angry. She leaned back in her chair, stared at Kelly for a moment, and then said, "Excuse me? You think I can't handle criticism? Kelly, I've been handling criticism my entire career. I've dealt with people telling me I'm too loud, too aggressive, too much. I've had to fight for every opportunity I've gotten in this industry. So don't sit there and tell me I can't handle criticism." Kelly didn't flinch. She maintained eye contact and said, "Then why are you so defensive right now? I'm just asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, some jokes do more harm than good. That's not an attack on you, Leslie. It's a conversation." Leslie let out a bitter laugh and said, "A conversation? This doesn't feel like a conversation, Kelly. This feels like an interrogation. You invited me on your show, and now you're sitting here trying to lecture me about comedy like you're some kind of authority on the subject. Have you ever done stand-up? Have you ever had to win over a hostile crowd? Because I have, and I know what works and what doesn't." The audience was completely silent now. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Kelly's producer could be seen off to the side, looking nervous, clearly wondering if they should cut to commercial. But Kelly kept going. She said, "I'm not claiming to be an expert on stand-up, but I do know about connecting with people, and I know that words matter. You can't just say whatever you want and then act surprised when people call you out for it." Leslie's voice got louder. She said, "Call me out, Kelly? You're not calling me out. You're trying to make me look like I'm some insensitive person who doesn't care about people's feelings. That's not who I am, and you know it. I've used my platform to speak up for marginalized communities. I've been an advocate for people who don't have a voice. So, for you to sit here and act like I'm the problem is honestly insulting." Kelly shook her head and said, "I never said you were the problem. I'm talking about specific jokes, specific comments. You can be an advocate and still say things that hurt people. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." Leslie threw her hands up in frustration and said, "So, what do you want me to do, Kelly? Apologize for every joke I've ever told that someone somewhere might have found offensive? Because that's never going to happen. Comedy is about taking risks. And sometimes those risks don't land. But that's part of the process. If you're too afraid to take risks, then you're not really doing comedy." Kelly's tone became more pointed. She said, "It's not about being afraid. It's about being responsible. You have a platform, Leslie. You have influence. And with that comes responsibility to think about the impact of your words. That's not censorship. That's just basic human decency." Leslie stood up slightly from her chair, not fully getting up, but clearly agitated. She said, "Basic human decency? So now I'm indecent because I don't agree with you? Kelly, this is exactly what I was talking about. This right here. The moment someone says something you don't like, you start attacking their character. You're proving my point." Kelly raised her voice just a bit, matching Leslie's energy. She said, "I'm not attacking your character. I'm challenging your argument. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that difference is part of the problem. You want to be able to say whatever you want without any pushback, and that's just not how the world works anymore." Leslie pointed at Kelly and said, "No, what you want is for everyone to agree with you. You want everyone to follow your rules about what's acceptable and what's not. But comedy doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that. People are messy. Opinions are messy. And if we can't laugh about that messiness, then what are we even doing?" Kelly crossed her arms and said, "We're trying to create a world where people feel safe and respected. That's what we're doing. And if your comedy can't exist in that world, then maybe you need to rethink your approach." Leslie's face went from angry to shocked. She said, "Are you serious right now? Did you really just say that to me, Kelly? You don't get to decide what comedy is or isn't. You don't get to tell me that my comedy doesn't belong in your version of the world. That's the most arrogant thing I've ever heard." Kelly stood her ground. She said, "It's not arrogant to want people to be kind to each other. It's not arrogant to ask comedians to think about who they're hurting with their jokes. And if you think that's too much to ask, then I don't know what to tell you." Leslie was visibly shaking now, her anger reaching a boiling point. She said, "You know what, Kelly? I came on this show thinking we were going to have fun, talk about my work, make people laugh. But instead, you've turned this into some kind of moral debate where you get to play the hero and I'm the villain. I'm not doing this anymore. Kelly's eyes widened slightly, realizing that Leslie was serious. She said, Leslie, I'm not trying to make you the villain. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about something that matters. Leslie cut her off. She said, No, you're trying to make yourself look good at my expense, and I'm done with it. The audience gasped quietly, sensing that something big was about to happen. Kelly tried to interject, her voice taking on a more conciliatory tone. She said, Leslie, please, that's not what this is about. I respect you and your work, I really do. But we can disagree on things and still have a productive conversation. That's all I'm trying to do here. Leslie shook her head firmly and said, Productive? Kelly, there's nothing productive about this. You've been judging me from the moment you brought up that podcast interview. You had your mind made up before I even sat down. This whole thing was a setup, and I should have seen it coming. Kelly's face showed genuine surprise at the accusation. She said, A setup? Leslie, I asked you a question about something you publicly stated. That's not a setup. That's journalism. That's what talk show hosts do. We ask questions about things our guests have said and done. If you didn't want to talk about it, your team could have told us it was off limits. Leslie leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tension. She said, Oh, so now it's my fault for not knowing you were going to ambush me on your show? Kelly, when someone comes on a talk show, they expect to have a conversation, not to be put on trial. You've been sitting there acting like a prosecutor this entire time, trying to catch me in some kind of gotcha moment. The audience was completely frozen. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were looking at each other in disbelief. Kelly's band members were staring at the stage, unsure of what to do. The producers were frantically talking into their headsets. But Kelly kept the interview going. She said, I'm not trying to catch you in anything. I'm asking you to explain your position because a lot of people were confused or upset by what you said. That's my job as a host, to dig deeper, to get clarity. Leslie stood up fully this time, her body language showing she was preparing to leave. She said, Your job is to make your guests feel comfortable and to have a good time. That's what a talk show is supposed to be. But you've turned this into something else entirely. You've turned this into a platform for you to grandstand about your values while making me look like I don't care about people. And I'm not going to sit here and let you do that. Kelly stood up as well, clearly not wanting the interview to end this way. She said, Leslie, I'm not grandstanding. I have opinions just like you do, and when those opinions differ, we talk about it. That's what adults do. We don't just run away when the conversation gets uncomfortable. That last comment was the final straw. Leslie's eyes went wide, and her voice became razor sharp. She said, Run away? Did you just accuse me of running away? Kelly, I've faced more difficult conversations in my life than you can even imagine. I've dealt with racism, sexism, and every other form of discrimination you can think of. So, don't you dare stand there and accuse me of running away from a conversation. What I'm doing is refusing to participate in your little performance where you get to look enlightened and I look like the bad guy. Kelly's frustration was showing now, too. She said, This isn't a performance, Leslie. This is me genuinely trying to understand why you think it's okay to dismiss people's concerns about harmful comedy. I'm trying to have a real conversation with you, but you're so caught up in being defensive that you can't even hear what I'm saying. Leslie pointed at Kelly again, her fingers shaking with anger. She said, I hear exactly what you're saying. You're saying that my comedy, my perspective, my lived experience doesn't matter as much as the feelings of people who might get offended. You're saying that I need to change who I am to fit into your idea of what's acceptable. And I'm telling you right now, that's never going to happen. Kelly's voice rose to match Leslie's intensity. She said, That's not what I'm saying at all, and you know it. Stop twisting my words to make yourself the victim here. I'm asking you to have some empathy, to consider that your words have consequences. That's it. That's all I'm asking. Leslie let out a loud, harsh laugh and said, Empathy? You want to talk to me about empathy? Kelly, I have spent my entire career using comedy to talk about pain, to talk about struggle, to talk about the things that people don't want to address. That is empathy. What you're doing right now, trying to control the narrative and tell me how I should express myself. That's not empathy. That's control. Kelly threw her hands up in exasperation and said, I'm not trying to control you. Why do you keep saying that? I'm asking questions. I'm challenging your ideas. That's what conversation is. If you can't handle someone disagreeing with you, then maybe you're not as tough as you think you are. The audience audibly gasped at that line. It was a direct hit, and everyone felt it. Leslie went completely still for a moment, her face showing a mixture of shock and fury. She said, "Wow. Okay, so that's what this is really about? You think I'm not tough? You think I can't handle disagreement, Kelly? I've been handling disagreement my whole life. What I can't handle is disrespect, and that's what this is. You've disrespected me from the moment this segment started, and I'm done pretending otherwise." Kelly's face flushed, and she said, "I have not disrespected you. I've challenged your ideas, yes, but that's not the same thing. If you feel disrespected every time someone disagrees with you, then that's something you need to work on, not me." Leslie grabbed her microphone and started to remove it. She said, "I don't need to work on anything, Kelly. What I need to do is get out of here before this gets any worse." She began unhooking the mic pack from her waist, her movements sharp and deliberate. Kelly's voice became more urgent as she watched Leslie unhook her microphone. She said, "Leslie, come on. Don't do this. We can work through this. Let's just take a breath and start over, please." Leslie paused for a second, the microphone pack in her hand, and looked directly at Kelly. She said, "Start over? Kelly, there's no starting over from this. You've made it very clear how you feel about me and my comedy, and I've made it clear that I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who doesn't understand what I do or why I do it. So no, we're not starting over. We're done." Kelly took a step closer, her tone almost pleading now. She said, "I do understand what you do. I've watched your work. I've laughed at your jokes. I've admired your career. That's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think you're talented enough to evolve, to think about how your comedy can be both funny and responsible." Leslie's laugh was bitter and exhausted. She said, "Evolve? You mean change to fit your standards? That's what evolve means to you, doesn't it? It means become more like what you think I should be." Well, I'm not interested in that kind of evolution, Kelly. I'm interested in being authentic, in being real, in saying what needs to be said, even if it makes people uncomfortable. And if that's not good enough for you, then I don't know what to tell you. Kelly's expression hardened again. She said, "Authenticity isn't an excuse for being careless with your words. You can be real and still be thoughtful. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. But you seem to think that being thoughtful means being weak or being censored, and that's just not true." Leslie placed the microphone on her chair and said, "I think being thoughtful means considering my audience and what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. I think being thoughtful means pushing boundaries and making people question their assumptions. And I think being thoughtful means not letting someone like you tell me that I'm doing it wrong just because you disagree with my approach." Kelly crossed her arms tightly and said, "So that's it? You're just going to leave? You're going to walk off my show because we couldn't see eye to eye on one topic?" Leslie nodded slowly and said, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Because this stopped being about one topic a long time ago. This became about you trying to prove something, trying to show your audience that you're on the right side of some imaginary line. And I'm not going to be your prop in that performance. I have too much respect for myself and for my work to let that happen." Kelly's voice cracked slightly with frustration. She said, "You're making this about me when it's really about you not wanting to hear criticism. That's what this is really about, Leslie. You came on this show expecting everyone to agree with you. And when that didn't happen, you couldn't handle it." Leslie turned to face Kelly one last time, her voice steady and cold. She said, "No, Kelly. I came on this show expecting to be treated like a guest, not like a defendant. I expected a conversation, not an ambush. And I expected basic respect, which you clearly weren't willing to give me. So yes, I'm leaving, and you can spin this however you want to your audience, but we both know what really happened here." Kelly shook her head, her own anger fully visible now. She said, "What really happened here is that you couldn't defend your position, so you're running away. That's what's happening, and everyone watching can see that." Leslie started walking toward the edge of the stage. She said, "Let them see whatever they want to see. I know who I am and I know what I stand for, and I'm not going to compromise that just to make you or anyone else comfortable." She took a few more steps, then stopped and turned back one more time. She said, "You know what the saddest part about all of this is, Kelly? I actually used to respect you. I thought you were different from other talk show hosts. I thought you genuinely cared about your guests and about having real conversations. But this wasn't real. This was an agenda disguised as a conversation, and I want no part of it. Kelly's face showed a flash of hurt before the anger returned. She said, I do care about my guests, and I do have real conversations. Just because you didn't like the questions doesn't mean they weren't valid. Maybe you should think about why you're so threatened by someone asking you to explain yourself. Leslie didn't respond to that. She just turned and walked off the stage, her stride purposeful and unwavering. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to react or stay quiet. Kelly stood there for a moment, watching Leslie leave, her jaw tight and her hands clenched at her sides. Finally, she turned to the audience and said, Well, that was unexpected. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have some music for you. The cameras cut away as the audience sat frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. The show's producers scrambled to figure out what to do next, how to fill the rest of the episode, and how to handle the inevitable fallout from what had just happened. The tension in the studio was thick, and everyone knew that this moment would be replayed, analyzed, and debated for days, weeks, maybe even months to come. This clash between Leslie Jones and Kelly Clarkson wasn't just about comedy or sensitivity or free speech. It was about two strong personalities who couldn't find common ground, who couldn't navigate their differences without it turning into something explosive. It was a reminder that even in controlled environments like talk shows, real emotions and real conflicts can surface in ways that nobody expects. And when they do, there's no script to follow, no easy resolution. Just the raw reality of two people who fundamentally disagree and aren't willing to back down. So, what do you think about what went down? Was Kelly out of line for pushing Leslie so hard on her views? Or was Leslie being too defensive about legitimate criticism? Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and drop a comment below answering this question. Whose side are you on and why?